everybody, Stephanie and Danielle here. We have a really amazing guest tonight, CHARIS DENISON. I want to tell you a little bit about her. And she has an amazing background. And what's really neat is she does the very rare work of really digging in on the front lines with kids. She's been doing this for over 20 years. And it's, she started out as a teacher, and what she saw was she just saw a real need to give the space to the kids to kind of talk through things. And she's learned so much just organically and experientially that I don't know that anyone really knows what she knows. And I can really say she's an expert. So what she's doing now is she's teaching at schools all over California. She's based out of Northern California, but she's traveling the country. She's doing one-on-one work, group work, and large-scale school work. So without further ado, let's get into it. Let's get into our topic tonight.
Awesome.
Hey, CHARIS. So as you know, I love what you have to say. And so you love boys like I love boys. You have 2 boys. I have 1 boy. Danielle has 2. And for me, it's very hard to think about our sons going out into the world in the current climate, So I think what would be really helpful is to hear about what are some of the misconceptions about boys that in your 17, 20 years of experience working with kids are just things that people say that aren't necessarily really true, or people feel or worry about that aren't really true.
I am not a researcher except on the ground. I've been having these conversations with teenagers for 20 years, and there is a lot of misunderstanding, and so, as a sex educator, among other areas, what I'm really struck by is that I talk to teen boys every day, and they are starving for places to be seen and to be given chances to be treated like the men that we hope they grow into, rather than who they're afraid that we're afraid they're going to be. Mm-hmm. And especially lately, there is just this quiet underlying message that's I'm really tired of the message of toxic masculinity, because my boys that I love, and I work with sexual assault survivors of young women, and our boys are being left out of that equation because they are misunderstood in this way, that there is this inherent idea that that sexuality among young men is dangerous. Mm-hmm. So I think the way that our boys are most misunderstood, right, is that all teenagers are after 3 things: connection, recognition, and power, mm-hmm. which in the language I use is the same thing as safe. They need to feel safe, which is connection. Mm-hmm. And if we look at our culture right now, places for boys to connect are pretty small.
Yeah.
They want to feel recognized, meaning they want to feel just important. They want to feel significant. And again, the spaces our culture rewards them for gaining power is very narrow.
What do you think parents would be most surprised to know about boys? Do you have any anecdotal stories about that?
But I do an activity where I say a statement, an ethical statement, and my teens, and again, this is in a co-ed situation, which I think is also powerful, to not separate our boys.
Yeah.
Which everything about separating our, whatever gender you identify with, makes this feel that there is something quiet or something unknown or something that needs to stay silent. And that's part of the problem. So together, I say a statement and they move from one side of the room to the other. And one of the things that's most surprising, and has been the same for 20 years, but with the recent addition of porn has shifted a little. And that's what breaks my heart, is that I say a statement. An example is, if you could have, and these are for the male identifying students in the room, if you could have the fantasy of your life, of what you could have a hookup, and these are for our straight identifying boys. If you could have the fantasy hookup of she can look exactly the way you want, you can have everything you've ever imagined, and you could have that for a week, which for a teenager is 2 years. Or they could have a long-term exclusive relationship with a partner that they felt they could really talk to and trust. And it is remarkable that that has never shifted, that predominantly at least 75% of the boys move to the side of the room where they would give up that fantasy for that connection. And so that's really surprising to a lot of people. What I do notice with the advance of porn, and again, I'm not vilifying porn in any, I just talk about regret versus joy, which is what my curriculum is about, is that our boys are given, before they've gotten romantically involved, a script that's told them what connection looks like. And so when I ask that question now, I can see the confusion on their face. And so that's what I'm trying to say.
It makes me very sad.
The phone number that I have that teens can text or call, there are a few things that haven't changed in the last 15 to 20 years, which is pretty remarkable in my field. There are 2 or 3 things that have never changed. And one is the demographic that calls and texts that number the most are male identifying teenagers between the ages of 14 and 21.
Wow.
The most. Now that's pretty surprising to most people.
Yeah.
And that tells us a lot.
Absolutely.
They don't have anyone to talk to. That's amazing.
Our boys they're not just hungry, they're starving to be allowed and invited into a space where they can practice being the men that we want them to be.
In a loving, non-judgmental
way. Loving and judgmental way, non-judgmental way, yeah. And if we don't give them that space, we have only ourselves to blame when they don't do it well.
I'm going to add to that if you watch Justin Baldoni, Man Enough, he literally covers that exact thing, that now they're 40 some years old or late 30s some years old, and yet they're still not having the conversation, and they want to have these conversations. There's 7, 8 men sitting around a table saying the same thing that you're saying right there. If we start young enough, again, we can disrupt the pattern of just non-talking.
Like, I have an amazing 15-year-old who facilitates with me, and he facilitates boys groups with me at 15 years old and talks about vulnerability as strength and communication. And this is a Latino male, straight, at 15 years old, but he has a class at his school that's supposed to be it is a social emotional curriculum. He's never spoken in class the entire semester, because he says it's too, the social risk is too high for me in a place where I actually go to school. He's an athlete, he's popular, and he's like, the particular class I'm in, he says, isn't safe enough for me to take that risk, but I can take him on the road and he can put himself out there with all these boys. So what is that? That doesn't say anything about that boy.
Yeah.
It says something about us. We are not creating spaces.
You know what, Charis, I can't help but think you were a teacher, and I have 2 kids in high school, and I am seeing all of these places where, my kids are like so worried about physics and math. And I'm like, this is stuff you can find on the computer.
Yeah.
We're really teaching you real skills where you can actually sit down and you can evaluate what's happening. Like, I'm having this conversation with my son, but I feel like in a way I have to bring all of this stuff into it, because there is nowhere that he can talk to anybody about, okay, let's just say, your friends are talking about a girl, or they're passing around a naked picture of a girl or whatever. There's nowhere that he's having conversations with adults who care, who aren't going to say this is right and this is wrong. But like you're saying, go in without judgment and say, how would you feel? And touch their emotional center. Right. Their emotional center is what we're not tapping into. And I think that's the difference between when this is right and this is wrong. I said to my son, because I'm doing the porn documentary, and I said, I'm really curious, where did I fall? Where did I not tell you things? And he's like, I said, tell me what you remember most that I said to you. And he goes, Mom, honestly, I don't really, I said, how about some statistics? He goes, Mom, I don't actually care about erectile dysfunction. He's like, I don't even know what that means. That doesn't relate to me in any way. I get that for the parents, that's scary. But for me, He said, the thing that you said to me that made the most sense and that would stop me from watching pornography the most is you told me about the porn stars. You told me that those girls might be trafficked. You told me that those girls might be raped on set. You told me the truth about that they die at 39 years of age. That means more to me than all of those statistics. I don't care about those statistics. I feel like a teenager where it doesn't relate to me, you know, like they don't think about drinking and driving accidents.
Right.
So what that tells me is the emotional center of boys is exactly what we want it to be. It's like
there.
It's there, but we're not even helping them to access it, to talk about it.
What's most important about what you just said is not only are we not giving them spaces to access that, we're teaching that out of them. So it's one thing to not allow them to practice those skills. We are very quietly and lately, loudly teaching that skill out of them. What we're teaching out of them is that the feeling that they have before they think and act is being taught out of them. And if our boys are thinking and they're not having conversations exactly like you just said, where they actually can think about the idea of some of these ideas, they're thinking our culture's thoughts, which is women are, you get recognized by objectifying women. All these messages that they don't necessarily even feel comfortable with, but very quickly, because their brains are forming, they can adapt to that. So if we don't talk to them when they're teens about this, we graduate them with these great GPAs, but we have taught the kind of that part of the human part of them is lonely and isolated and pushed towards, you know, being an asshole. But like there was, again, the fact that I had some boys come to me that where else could they do this? But there was a game right as porn started getting really, really popular. There was a game that was called politically incorrect. It was called Indian Poker, which used to be a name of a poker game a long time ago too. But this game was predominantly in fraternities, but high school boys were simulating it. And what you do is that you sit around a table and there's a tablecloth and you invite freshman girls. So the girls want to be on this list. And again, they know they're being objectified, but they're like, I'm my own person. I can't believe they would do this, but did you get invited? Like it's that double standard of just like, oh, but are you on the list? And so these girls would get invited. And the goal of the game is that the girls would wait in the other room. The boys would sit around this round table. The young woman would come in and climb under the table. So she's on her knees under the tablecloth and she would give oral sex randomly to the boys. And the person that won, the boy that won, was the one that showed absolutely no emotion that he was being serviced. And so, and these are privileged, educated young men, with a $40,000, $50,000 tuition. And this is what they're rewarded for. And this is like, and this girl then can stay on the top, like she gets to be invited back. But
lucky her.
I wanted to make sure that my interview is a one of hope, because it is not like for every terrible story like that, I hear 15 amazing ones from boys that are pushing back against this. But I feel like we have to hold the space for both, and we have to acknowledge that some of those boys in that room didn't want to win that game.
No.
But where is their social street cred if they don't? And so they need more places to fail.
If we never have the conversation, how can doing the opposite give you credibility?
That is exactly it. And it isn't, and all I had to do when I talked to those boys was repeat back exactly what they were doing. And they were like, oh, all I did was say, okay, so there's a girl on her hands and knees, invisible, servicing all of you. And then they're like, oh my God, that's really gross. And I said, so I'm just repeating back what you just told me. And they're like, wow. But that's all he needed. You needed 4 minutes of a compassionate mirror saying, this is what I'm hearing you say. Not like you're a rapist or you're a misogynist or he just needed that mirror.
Yeah.
A loving mirror.
Yeah. CHARIS, if you're talking to these kids and they're trying to work their way back from regret, what about a kid who's never done anything before? Like, let's say it's a kid who's never smoked pot or never drank.
Right.
They don't really know what the regret looks like because they've not done it. So how do you get them to think and sort of just, I mean, is it just based on here statistic? Like that's
Right.
too
Right.
parenty to me. So
Yeah.
how do you do that? Like, how do you have that conversation?
I think what's so great about that question is that it goes back to the point where I say, when we start talking about sex, we seem to want to start over. Like it's different language, a different conversation, a different formula, and it's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about sex. So you do have a boy that's experienced regret.
Mm-hmm.
He has experience.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And so to be able to get in a place where that boy gets in a place where he can either reflect with you or somebody else on what regret feels like to him and what it feels like to feel unsafe. And what do you do when you're unsafe? I have something called the fallback position. Like, what do you do when you like, what's your immediate impulse when you feel kind of unsafe or like peer pressure? And that's an unconscious choice. How do we make that conscious? If our boys that have never done anything sexually can name a couple of their fallbacks, then they already have like what I call preflect instead of reflect. They're preflected of like, oh, so when I become sexually active, when I get really scared, I go silent and I just put my head down and keep going and hope things get better. How would that look like in a sexual situation? So that's definitely one way of addressing your question. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think that like in some ways, is it almost like a boundaries kind of a thing? Like where, okay, these are the feelings I have when I realize I'm going into waters that are too deep for me and I don't feel comfortable there. Like, so instead of just pushing through because I'm getting boys telling me, oh, if you don't have sex with her, blah, 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 blah. Like instead of doing that, they're like, okay, hold on. I know personally, this is how I feel when I get anxious or it's just too much for me. And then I have to realize this maybe isn't the right time for me. And just at least having that thought in your head and that conversation in your head, like something's not right. I'm not feeling right. And it's okay for me to take a different choice.
Yeah.
Maybe that's it.
And the idea in those conversations before we even talk about sex and then put it into sex is that what we want for our children is to help them stay the subjects of their own story. And so, and right now, teenagers, you can go from subject to object about 15 times a day.
So if you're going to be the subject of your own story, if somebody's pressuring you to do something, you're the object of what they want you to do. You're not like, you know, having agency over your choices. You're following a script that porn has taught you, or what it means to be a boy who's 18, who's supposed to have had sex, or a kid who's going to be cool, smokes pot. So that's when they're following a script and not having agency over their choices. They're the object rather than the subject.
Exactly. I have an amazing school that I travel to a couple times a month pretty regularly. And the seniors are creating these t-shirts that say, resist the shoulder shove, to hand to their sophomores, because sophomores that are becoming sexually active, and a lot of them are feeling pressured. A lot of them are becoming sexually active younger than they really want to.
Right.
But around 10th grade, there gets to be, because of the hookup culture and the amount of partying that's happening. So here, the example of subject object is a really good one. And when I talk again with boys and girls in the room and everything in between, gender wise, not separated, but this idea that if two people are in a hookup and that is their choice, they're both subjects of that story, right? And they're hooking up. And I'm talking about a heterosexual hookup right now. And so they're both subjects. Very quickly, what can happen is lately with this push of oral sex,
and
not a reciprocal oral sex, that female on male because of porn, that all of a sudden she feels the boy's hands on her shoulders pushing her downward, called shoulder shove, and it's quiet because nobody's talking, and in that moment, that young woman goes from subject to object. And it happens really quickly. And the problem is, if she's thinking instead of feeling, she's thinking before she acts, she's thinking messages that our society gives us, which again, doesn't serve our boys, but it sets up this sexist idea where she's thinking, and this happens across the country. She's thinking, oh no, I don't want to make him mad. So if I stop, he's going to get angry, because girls are socialized to not make anyone upset. You need to facilitate. And, or B, I think I must have done something wrong. Either I let him on, or maybe I was a tease, blah, blah, blah. And the third is, frequently, I feel really bad for him, because, he failed his chem test and he doesn't have a lot of people to talk to, which again, now we're talking about like oral sex as community service, which I don't know how we got there, but,
literally the best comment ever.
Well, right. But when I say that again, co-ed, so it's not a blaming statement. And that's the problem right now with how badly things are going around consent. When I say that, I'm not saying, so boys, you're totally screwing up and you're objectifying women. And I'm not saying to girls, you're victimizing yourself. I'm saying this is the setup, that when we're supposed to talk the most, we are encouraged in our culture to not do so.
Right.
And our boys are like, wait, am I supposed to be doing this? Like,
well, that's what I was going to say. I actually think they're both following the script. They both become objects at that moment.
Completely.
Because here's the thing, because they've never experienced it before. They think that like, oh, I'm supposed to tell the girl to do this, right? Rather than realizing that like carried on long enough, you'll get there. Eventually you'll be curious. You'll want to do something. Like you don't thank you. I know where your crotch is. If I want to do that, I don't need you to tell me where it is. You know what I mean?
Here's the thing with the think before you act. Like when I actually stand up there and I say, by the time you've thought all those things, you have a penis in your mouth. And at that point, regret. The problem with girls in that situation is that by the time they've thought of something, regret is already on the table. Whereas trying to value that feeling, which is ew, and having both parties realize that that is the most important thing. And I have, again, 75% of the time, the boys would love to know that. They're not, we are treating our boys as potential predators or innocent victims. And they're not either. And both of those are very, very scary for our boys. And for someone who really loves our boys, we're setting them up to fail.
But that's the whole thing, is like, where are we ever having these conversations? It's never happening. You're getting a sex talk. Right. You're talking to your parents. And you know what I said? Like, I love the idea that even just talking to your kids beforehand so that they can go like, oh, wait, if I feel ooh, I have a couple of things I can say, or I have pre-thought the whole thing so I know how to respond. If you're caught in the moment, you don't have the ability to get out of it. You have to imagine that that's going to happen. We have to be having those conversations in school, that this is realistic. This is what's happening. And how do we teach kids to go like if it was a drinking situation, oh, thanks, I just finished a beer. Or, you know what? I drank some before I came here. Or I'm allergic to alcohol. I can't drink. You know what I mean? Like whatever it happens to be, if you don't give them a list of things they can say, or even let them know that that's a possibility, how do they know that?
We have to think radically right now. And sadly, radically is just like, can we just talk?
Well, wow. It is. And the other thing is, like, honestly, Charis, parents don't even know what they are. I mean, I've been doing research on this for 10 months and only just about 4 weeks ago, my daughter came into me with a text that said, choke me and tell me that I'm pretty. Not a text, a Visco. And literally it sent me reeling. Like, I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Like, and how would anyone know that? I'm literally researching this all the time. So, I mean, of course I'm going to know, but parents don't even know what their kids are facing. And they don't even understand that if a kid, like if I heard, oh my God, my son choked some girl while they were having sex, I'd be like, oh my God, what kind of animal did I raise? You know, like I would have all sorts of judgment. However, knowing that my child's been following a script because they've been indoctrinated since they were 11 and now they're 18, and for 7 years they've been watching some guy choke a girl in porn, what is he supposed to think?
Right. And so your response when you see if your child, if you still, and again, keep the connection no matter what, if the average boy is 11, he hasn't masturbated yet. And masturbation is when our boys actually are encouraged to use their imagination to the rest of their body. They connect sensuality, what I call this idea of sensual hunger, where they can imagine what is beautiful to them, what makes them feel alive and connected, and what does that look like. But if they're seeing porn and then they hit puberty and then they masturbate, they've inherited a script that's handed to them that doesn't allow them to imagine. And then boys are really taught to follow directions. Anything that seems more important than you just do whatever the hell that person tells you to do, and that's how you get an A. So, I mean, and then we get mad that they're all like, it's a setup.
Because they're not critical thinking. Yeah. Meanwhile, we're telling them not to critical.
Right.
I think after this whole conversation, I can really see where you're coming from, of just staying the subject of your own story. You know what I mean? Like I say it to my son all the time, like, you know, when we were kids, we would learn about sex because we were like in the car making out with the boy after the dance, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm feeling something, or I'm curious, or whatever. And yeah, even though they were kind of following maybe a little bit of like a guy script, it's like you kind of took things slowly. You kind of tried to figure stuff out on your own, and no one had ideas about what was going to happen. I mean, no one had any idea except for the naked centerfold in Playboy, which was just a girl who was just naked, and then the rest was your imagination.
Right. And the difference between what the scenario you just described that's so important is that you didn't have a bunch of people on social media waiting to hear how that went. And so the fear of how you're going to be evaluated and watched as far as what happened, you could just like pretend like, God, I hope only 3 people hear about what just happened. These boys have to posture, or have to, unless we create spaces to realize, hey, this is a setup. Like, don't play into that. But they will go along because someone's going to snap about it, or it's going to be on someone's Instagram that, you know, he didn't follow through, or
but we also have to remember that girls are fed a script too, and also that girls are pushing boys to follow their script. Like, I'm not putting the blame on girls, but I am to a degree. It's not really a blame of girls or boys. It's actually a blame of pornography and society and what it's saying. So girls are buying into this script as much as boys can buy into this script. You know what I mean?
Well, they're victimized. I mean, they're pushed into doing that because the only way a girl is noticed, when we go back to connection, recognition, and power, girls are rewarded for only being recognized as objects. And so their idea of power is, what if I objectify myself first?
Right. Well,
that's nude, hence the pull my hair. It's like that's a desperate attempt at being the subject of her story, because that's all we give her to work with.
Right. Well, but this is the interesting thing. So Danielle's talking to her son the other day, and he said, like, what about, we never even talk about boys who are sexually assaulted. And I was like, you know what? It happens, because let me tell you something. Just because a boy has a hard on doesn't mean he wants to have sex with you. So you could turn a boy on and he might have sex with you because the script in his head says, oh, I'm a boy. Of course, I'm supposed to take advantage of every opportunity that's given to me. Right. I'm going to follow that script. And a girl says, I have the power because I can touch his penis and I can turn him on sexually.
Right.
The fact of the matter is that boys are vulnerable to that too, to following a script. That, you know, we've become like zombies to what the porn industry has sold us. It's a bill of goods that is making all of us the object of the story rather than the subject of the story.
It is, but I think we have to be careful to not think this all started with the popularization of porn. Because what porn did was it jumped onto a paradigm that's existed for a very long time.
Yes. But isn't it different though? Because
very much.
I mean, because now, I mean, you and I never grew up watching porn. You know what I mean? Like, girls today, even if it's only 30%, have seen porn. I mean, that's a lot. I mean, because we're not talking the porn that you and I saw if we saw porn, which was, you know, the tennis teacher and the girl he's coaching. You know what I mean? Like that was, and you watch the whole story
in the first 5 seconds. Yeah,
we're jumping right into anal sex, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
And that's not the porn that we would have seen ever.
Right. I mean, I got a text 5 minutes before this interview that said, you know, I haven't been able to get hard, even to masturbate for 2 weeks. This is how many times I've been watching porn. Do you think there's a connection? And I mean, where is there a place for that boy to ask that question?
No.
And so what we need to do, I mean, answer as parents right now, and this is the time to do it, is to validate and create spaces that are non-judgmental and completely reward our boys for showing the humanity that we're now condemning them for not having.
Well, thank you so much. We could talk for hours, and we'll of course shorten this up. But you're an amazing voice. You're offering an amazing, needed service. We need to put you in charge of training hundreds of others like you to really dig in with kids.
And we'll put your website and everything below this video so that people can reach out to you, because
I was going to say, I don't even think I said that you're the founder of Prajna Consulting, which is the way. We'll have a link here. This is her business, and this is what she does, and she's amazing at it. So
well, and I'll bring teens too, because it's really great. I like to present with my teens, so yeah, that's really great.
Very powerful, very powerful. Thank you so much.
We'll do that next time. Thank you, Charis.
Take care.
Thank you.